Starting over after 40 with no money. Picture this. You are sitting at your kitchen table on a Sunday night. The house is quiet. Your kids are asleep. And you have got your bank statement open on your phone, scrolling through a list of transactions that look exactly like last month and the month before that, and every month for the past 5 years. Rent, groceries, gas, insurance, a subscription you forgot to cancel, maybe a late fee that stings more than it should, and somewhere at the bottom of that screen, a savings balance that has barely moved since you opened the account. You are 43 years old, or 47, or 51, and this quiet, sinking feeling settles in your chest because you realize that the life you imagined building by now, the one with a little cushion, a little breathing room, a little proof that all those years of working actually added up to something that life does not exist yet. Most financial advice will tell you that you are behind, that you should have started in your 20s, that compound interest needed decades to work its magic and you missed the window. And honestly, that kind of advice is not wrong. It is just useless when you are already here, because what nobody talks about is this. You did not lose time. You lost intention. Somewhere in your 20s, you had fire, you had plans, but life did what life does. The job came and then the bills came louder. And slowly, without anyone noticing, your mindset shifted from building something to just keeping things running. From where am I going to how do I get through this month? That shift is so quiet you do not even hear it happening, but it is the single most expensive thing that has ever happened to your finances. And there is something else most people never consider, something that has been shaping every financial decision you have made since childhood without you even knowing it. Your money personality. Not the version of yourself you present at work or at the dinner table, the version that shows up when a paycheck hits your account, the version that decides whether to save or spend before your rational mind has even had its morning coffee. This invisible pattern, formed long before you ever earned a dollar, is running quietly underneath every budget you have tried and abandoned, every savings plan that lasted 3 weeks. In a few minutes, I will show you exactly which type you are and why that knowledge changes everything. This video is not a lecture. It is a blueprint. We are going to walk through the exact mental traps that keep people stuck, the 4 hidden money personalities that silently drain bank accounts, and a simple income framework that works whether you are making $30,000 or $130,000 a year. 12 months from now, you will not be where you are tonight. Not if you stay until the end. Part 1. Why most people stay stuck financially. There is a moment that happens to almost everyone in their late 30s or early 40s. You wake up one morning, pour your coffee, and realize that the gap between where you are and where you thought you would be has become too wide to ignore. Not because you were lazy, not because you lacked talent or ambition. You had plenty of both in your 20s. You were going to build something, start a business, invest early, save aggressively. The vision was clear, but then the first real paycheck arrived, and with it came rent-a-car payment, student loans, groceries, and 100 small expenses that felt urgent in the moment. The goals did not disappear overnight. They just got pushed to next month, then next year, then once things settled down, and things never settled down. What happened was not a failure of effort, it was a failure of focus. Your brain made a quiet, almost invisible shift from building mode to survival mode. One day, you were thinking about where you wanted to be in 10 years. The next, you were thinking about how to cover this month's electricity bill. And survival mode is seductive because it feels productive. You are working hard. You are paying bills. You are keeping everything afloat. But staying afloat is not the same thing as moving forward, and that distinction is where most people lose an entire decade without noticing. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." He wrote that almost 2,000 years ago, while governing an empire during a plague, managing wars on multiple fronts, and grieving the loss of several children, the man had every reason to feel overwhelmed by survival. Yet he kept returning to the same idea. The danger is not in having too little time. It is in spending years doing urgent things that are not actually important. That is exactly what survival mode does. It fills every hour with urgency, so there is no room left for intention. And this is the part that hurts the most. The mistakes that were free in your 20s are brutally expensive in your 40s. Skipping retirement contributions at 22 costs you a few $100s in potential growth. Skipping them at 22 and not starting until 42 costs you hundreds of thousands, not because you are less capable now, but because time was the most powerful asset you had, and it was working for someone else while you were busy just surviving. So if you are sitting there thinking, I have wasted too much time, pause for a moment. You did not waste time. You spent it on survival, and survival is not nothing. But the season for surviving needs to end, and the season for building needs to begin. That transition starts with understanding why your brain has been working against you. Part 2. Present bias is quietly robbing you. Your brain has a built-in preference for right now. Behavioral scientists call it present bias, and it is one of the most powerful forces working against your financial future. It works like this. When you got your first real job, someone in HR handed you a form and asked how much you wanted to contribute to your retirement plan. And your 22-year-old brain did a quick calculation, not about retirement, about shoes, about rent, about Friday nights, about everything that felt real and immediate and alive. Retirement at 60. That was a ghost living in some distant future you could not even picture. So you chose the minimum contribution, signed the form, and went back to planning your weekend. That was not stupidity. It was biology. The human brain is wired to prioritize rewards it can see and touch over rewards that exist 40 years from now in some abstract account balance. Every financial choice you make runs through this filter first, and the present almost always wins. Think about what this looks like over a lifetime. You know you should start a savings account, but the couch you have been eyeing is on sale this weekend. You know you should take that certification course that would boost your income, but it takes 2 years, and that feels like forever. You know you should build an emergency fund, but there is a vacation that would feel really good right now. Each individual decision seems small, harmless even, but stack 2 decades of those decisions on top of each other, and you get a 40-year-old sitting at a kitchen table wondering where all the money went. The cruelest part of present bias is what it costs you in compound growth, based on historical average market returns of around 8% annually. If you had invested just $200 a month starting at age 25, you would have over $400,000 by 65. Start the same investment at 45, and you end up with less than $100,000. Same monthly amount, same effort, wildly different outcomes. Not because of intelligence or discipline, but because of when you started. And present bias does not just affect saving, it affects growth. Many people in their 40s know exactly what they need to do to increase their income. Go back to school, learn a new skill, get a certification, start that side business. But the process takes 2 or 3 years, and the brain looks at those 3 years of effort and compares them to just continuing life as it is right now. The discomfort of growth loses to the comfort of the familiar almost every time. You already sense this pattern in your own life. The moments where you chose ease over investment, not because you were careless, but because your wiring made the easier path feel like the smarter one. Recognizing that wiring is not about blame. It is about seeing the game clearly so you can finally stop playing it blind. Part 3. Start with what you have today. One of the most destructive beliefs in personal finance is the idea that you need a certain income before money management even matters. I only make $40,000 a year. What is there to budget? Once I get that raise, then I will start saving. You cannot invest with this kind of paycheck. These sentences sound reasonable. They feel logical, and they are completely wrong. A woman named Diane, 52, working as a school bus driver in Memphis, told herself the same thing for 15 years. She earned $28,000 a year. After rent, after her car note, after groceries and her daughter's expenses, there was almost nothing left. Budgeting felt like rearranging crumbs on an empty plate. so she never started. She figured she would get serious about money once she got a better paying job. That better paying job never came. But something else did. Diane's bus broke down and the repair cost $800 she did not have. She borrowed from a payday lender. The interest snowballed. Within 6 months, she owed $2,200 on what started as an $800 problem. That was her breaking point. She did not get a raise. She did not find a windfall. She sat down with a notebook and a calculator and wrote down every single dollar that came in and every single dollar that went out. She found $63 a month she could redirect. Not save, not invest, redirect. Away from subscriptions she never used, food she was buying out of habit, and a gym membership she had not touched in 2 years. $63. That was it. She put $30 into a basic savings account and $33 into a cookie jar she kept on top of her refrigerator. Within 12 months, she had $756 set aside. It was not life-changing money, but when her daughter needed new glasses that winter, Diane paid for them in cash without borrowing a cent, and something shifted inside her. Not her income, her confidence. The principle is uncomfortable but true. If you cannot manage $2,000 with wisdom, you will not manage $20,000 any differently. The amount is irrelevant. What matters is the discipline of directing money with purpose instead of letting it disappear into the blur of daily spending. The habits you build with small money are the exact same habits that scale when bigger money arrives. And bigger money does arrive eventually if you are also working on growing your income. But it arrives into a system that is ready for it, not into the same leaky bucket that could not hold $50. Pull up your bank statement right now, not tomorrow, not after this video, right now. Look at the last 30 days. See where your money actually went, not where you think it went, where it actually went. That gap between perception and reality is where your financial reset begins. Part 4, your 10-year financial reset plan. The shift from surviving to building does not happen in a single dramatic moment. It happens when you stop reacting to money and start directing it. And directing it starts with a vision, not a vague wish. Not, I want to be comfortable someday. A specific written 10-year picture of what your financial life looks like. How much do you want saved? What does your income look like? Do you own property? Are you debt-free? What does retirement look like? Write it down, on paper, in a notebook, on the back of a napkin if that is all you have. The act of writing it forces your brain to move from fantasy to planning. But here is what most people get wrong with long-term goals. They write down a big number and then stare at it until it feels impossible. I want to save $60,000 in 10 years. The brain hears 60,000 and immediately starts listing reasons it will never happen. Where will that come from? You barely have $60 at the end of the month. The number becomes a wall instead of a door, so you shrink it. 60,000 over 10 years is 6,000 a year. 6,000 a year is 500 a month. 500 a month is about $16.50 a day. Suddenly the wall has cracks in it. $16 a day. That is 2 lunches you packed instead of bought. 1 subscription you canceled. A carpool instead of driving alone 3 days a week. Now you break that $500 into 3 streams. The first chunk, maybe $125, goes into something you can access within 24 hours. This is your emergency fund, a high-yield savings account, a money market fund, something liquid. This is the money that catches you when the car breaks down or the water heater dies, so you do not have to raid your long-term investments every time life throws a wrench. The second chunk, another $125, goes into a medium-term vehicle, a certificate of deposit, a bond fund, something locked up for 3 to 5 years. You cannot touch it easily, and that is the point. This money is building toward medium-range goals, a down payment, a career change, your kid's college fund. The third chunk, $250, goes into long-term investments, a retirement account, an index fund, something you will not touch for 15 or 20 years. The further away you put this money, the harder it works for you through compound growth. Now, something incredible happens over time. In year 1, you are living on about 80 to 90% of your income, while the rest gets directed into these 3 buckets. It feels tight. It requires sacrifice. But by year 3, if you are also growing your income through skill development side projects or career advancement, your expenses stay roughly the same while your income rises. Suddenly, you only need 60 or 70% of your income to live. The surplus grows. The investments compound. The goals that felt impossible in year 1 start looking conservative by year 5, and your vision updates. The 10-year picture you wrote on that napkin no longer excites you because you have already outgrown it. You write a new one, bigger, bolder, built on the momentum of actually seeing your money move in the right direction for the first time in your adult life. Part 5. Your Money Personality Explained. Every person watching this has a hidden relationship with money that was formed long before they ever earned a dollar. It was shaped in kitchens and living rooms, on playgrounds and at dinner tables, through things that were said, things that were never said, and things that were simply absorbed by watching the adults around you. These patterns are called money archetypes, and they control more of your financial behavior than any budget spreadsheet ever will. Until you name yours, every savings plan you write will feel like you are pushing a boulder uphill in the dark. Not because the plan is wrong, because the person executing it has never been introduced to themselves. There are 4 archetypes that account for the vast majority of financial struggles in people over 40. See if you recognize yourself in any of them. The first is the hoarder. This person grew up watching scarcity up close. Maybe their parents argued about bills every month. Maybe they wore hand-me-downs and heard phrases like, "We cannot afford that." So often it became background music. So when they finally started earning their own money, they gripped it hard. They saved obsessively. They invested wisely. They accumulated wealth, but they could never enjoy it. Every purchase triggered guilt. Every expense felt like a step closer to the poverty they swore they would never return to. They have the money, they just cannot breathe around it. The hoarder's challenge is not building wealth. It is learning to trust that spending wisely is not the same as losing everything. The second is the show-off. This archetype often forms from childhood rejection. A kid who was always picked last for the team, who wore the wrong clothes, who felt invisible at school. Somewhere deep in that child's mind, a promise formed. When I have money, everyone will see me. Everyone will want to be around me. And so they grow up and spend loudly. Expensive dinners for friends who never offer to split the check. Designer clothes they cannot actually afford. Generous gifts funded by credit cards. Their motto, whether they say it out loud or not, is simple. I will buy the love I never received. The bank account stays empty, but the ego stays fed. The show-off's path forward is not willpower. It is learning to separate approval from net worth. The third is the rescuer. This person cannot say no, not because they are weak, but because their identity is woven into being needed. They are the one who always picks up the phone when someone has a financial emergency, the one who dips into savings to cover someone else's rent, the one who lends money they know will never come back and then feels guilty for wanting it returned. A man named Gerald, 48, living outside of Atlanta, fit this archetype perfectly. Every payday, at least 2 people in his life would call with some urgent need. A cousin whose car got repossessed, a childhood friend facing eviction, a sibling who just needed a little help until Friday. Gerald would drain his checking account, sometimes even pulling from his modest retirement fund, because the thought of saying no made him feel like a bad person. By the time he was 45, he had given away more than $40,000 over 12 years. Not $1 came back. What changed for Gerald was not his heart. He still wanted to help. What changed was his system. He set up automatic transfers so that the moment his paycheck hit, 80% of it vanished into accounts he could not easily access. He left himself a small, fixed amount each month for helping others. When someone called asking for $3,000, he could honestly say, "I do not have $3,000, but I have $150 and it is yours." Some people stopped calling. The ones who stayed were the ones who actually valued him beyond his wallet. The fourth is the gambler. This person is wired for adrenaline. They are often brilliant at making money because they are not afraid to chase opportunity. but they are equally comfortable losing everything because their brain tells them, easy come, easy go, I will make it back. They are at the casino on payday. They are putting their bonus into a speculative stock tip from a guy at the gym. They bet 100,000, hoping to turn it into 400,000, walk away with 40,000, and genuinely believe they won. If you are married to one of these archetypes, or if you are one, the friction is real. Hoarders married to gamblers fight about every dollar. Rescuers married to show-offs run out of money from two different directions. Knowing your archetype and your partners is not a luxury. It is a survival skill, because until you understand who you become when money touches your hands, every financial plan you write will be sabotaged by the person you do not realize you are. Part 6. The emergency fund that saves your momentum. Almost every financial comeback story that fails shares the same plot twist. Someone gets motivated. They start saving. They set up a system. The first month works. The second month works. Momentum builds. And then the hot water heater explodes. Or the transmission goes out. Or a medical bill shows up that insurance barely touched. With no emergency fund, there is only one option: pull from the savings. Pull from the investments. Pull from the very accounts that were supposed to represent a new beginning. And once you break that seal, something breaks inside too. The voice in your head says, see, it does not work. Every time I try, something happens. And so you stop. Not because the system failed, but because the system had no buffer. This is why the first dollars you save should not go toward retirement or wealth building. They should go into a boring, accessible, completely unglamorous emergency account. A high-yield savings account at an online bank. A money market fund. Something that earns a little interest but can be in your checking account within 24 hours if you need it. The target: 3 months of essential expenses. Not 3 months of your full lifestyle. 3 months of the bare minimum rent, food, utilities, insurance, transportation. For most people, that number is somewhere between $4,000 and $8,000. And yes, that sounds like a mountain when you are starting from zero, but remember the math from earlier. Even $100 a month gets you to $1,200 in a year. In 3 years, that is $3,600. You are not building a fortress overnight. You are laying bricks one at a time. The emergency fund does something beyond financial protection. It changes your psychology. When you know there is a cushion beneath you, the desperation fades. You stop making fear-based decisions. You stop staying in a job you hate because you cannot afford 2 weeks without a paycheck. You negotiate better because you are not negotiating from despair. That quiet confidence is worth more than the dollar amount in the account. And here is the critical part. The money you put toward long-term goals needs to go into accounts you cannot easily access. Retirement accounts with penalties for early withdrawal. Certificates of deposit with lock-in periods. Investments that require paperwork and waiting periods to liquidate. Not because you do not trust yourself, but because you understand yourself. When crisis hits, and it will, you need friction between your panic and your future. The emergency fund handles the crisis. The locked accounts protect the dream. Part 7. The 70-10-10-10 Rule Breakdown. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember 4 numbers: 70-10-10-10. Every dollar that comes into your life gets split into 4 buckets. Not after you pay bills, not after you see what is left over. The split happens first, the moment money arrives. The first 10% is what you give. If you are a person of faith, that might be a tithe. If you are not, it might be a monthly donation to a cause you care about, or a fixed amount you send to a family member who depends on you. This is not about religion. It is about 2 things: generosity and boundaries. When you designate a specific amount for giving, you are also setting a ceiling. You know exactly how much you can afford to help with, and you communicate that clearly. I can give you $400 every month. That is what I have set aside, and you can count on it. No guilt, no scrambling, no raiding your savings because someone showed up with a sob story on a Friday afternoon. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, spent most of his life as a slave in Rome before gaining his freedom. He owned almost nothing, and yet he wrote, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." He was not talking about deprivation. He was talking about intention. about deciding in advance what your money is for so that the world cannot decide for you. That first 10% is your way of living generously without losing yourself in the process. The second 10% goes into active income. This is the money you use to grow, a course that upgrades your skills, seed money for a side business, books, tools, certifications, anything that increases your ability to earn more in the future. Your emergency fund also lives here in the early stages until it reaches that 3-month cushion. This bucket is where you invest in yourself directly and deliberately. The third 10% goes into passive income. This is money you hand over to time and let it work without your involvement. Index funds, retirement accounts, bonds, real estate investment trusts. You do not need to understand every instrument in detail. You need a financial advisor or a robo-advisor platform that matches your risk tolerance and time horizon. This 10% is your future self's paycheck, the income that arrives decades from now because you made a decision today. And then you live on the 70% that remains. 70% for rent, groceries, gas, insurance, entertainment, clothing, everything. That is your life. Everything that keeps the lights on and puts food on the table fits inside this boundary. Now, these numbers are a starting point, not a prison. If you are supporting aging parents and the giving portion needs to be 15%, adjust the others. If you are aggressively building a business, maybe active income gets 20% and you live on 60%. The power is not in the exact percentages. The power is in the compartments. Once money has a designated purpose, it stops leaking. And over time, something shifts. In year 1, living on 70% feels like a squeeze. By year 3, if your income has grown, 70% of a larger number feels spacious. By year 5, you might only need 50% to cover your lifestyle. The surplus compounds, the buckets overflow, and the person who started with nothing at 43 is now sitting on a foundation at 53 that most people never build at any age. Part 8, automate everything and remove willpower from the equation. There is a scene that plays out in households across this country every single payday. You check your balance, the number looks decent, maybe even a little hopeful this time. You think this is the month. This is the month I actually put something aside. And then the day happens. The car makes a noise you do not recognize. Your daughter needs new cleats before Friday. You get an email about a sale that ends at midnight. And by the time you sit down to transfer money to savings, there is nothing left to transfer. Not because you spent recklessly, because you spent humanly. You were never fighting a spending problem. You were fighting a sequencing problem. You were trying to save what was left over, and life has a way of ensuring there is never anything left over. There is one final habit that separates people who build wealth from people who just talk about it, and it is the simplest one on this list. Automate. Set up automatic transfers so that the moment your paycheck lands in your account, the money moves before you can touch it. 10% to giving, 10% to active income, 10% to passive investments, all of it automated, all of it scheduled for the same day your direct deposit hits. Why does this matter so much? Because willpower is a terrible financial strategy. Every time you sit with money in your account and have to decide between saving and spending, your brain runs that present bias calculation again. I know I should save this, but the tires need replacing, and we have not gone out in weeks, and that sale ends tonight. 9 times out of 10, spending wins. Not because you are irresponsible, because you are human. Automation removes the decision entirely. The money leaves before the debate even starts. You wake up on payday, check your account, and the only thing left is the 70% you live on. There is no inner negotiation, no guilt, no temptation. The system already handled it, and something beautiful happens psychologically. When the emergency fund grows and you did not have to agonize over each deposit, it feels like the money appeared on its own. When the retirement account crosses a threshold you never thought possible, it feels like momentum rather than sacrifice. Automation turns discipline into a background process, something that happens to your finances rather than something you have to force upon them every single month. A woman named Patricia, 46, A single mom working in insurance in Columbus, Ohio, described it perfectly. She said, "For 20 years, I tried to budget. I tried to save. Every month, I would sit down with a spreadsheet and plan it all out. And every month, something would come up and the plan would collapse. Then I set up automatic transfers for everything. The first paycheck after that, I panicked because my checking account looked lower than usual. But then I realized the money was not gone. It was just in the right place for the first time in my life. After 6 months, I stopped checking. After a year, I had more saved than in the entire previous decade combined. The lesson is straightforward. You do not need more willpower. You do not need to be better at saying no. You need a system that says no for you automatically, consistently, every single payday, whether you are feeling motivated or not. Motivation fades. Systems do not. 12 months. That is all the distance between where you are tonight and a version of your life you would not recognize. Not because some miracle is coming, but because small, quiet, consistent choices stack in ways the human brain struggles to imagine until it actually witnesses them. $100 a month becomes $1,200. $1,200 becomes a cushion. A cushion becomes confidence. Confidence becomes momentum. And momentum, once it starts, has a weight of its own. You did not end up here because you were careless. You ended up here because the world is loud and urgency is convincing, and nobody sat with you at 22 and said, "The way you handle this first paycheck will echo for decades." But you are here now. Your eyes are open. And the distance between you and the life you keep picturing in quiet moments is not a wall. It is a door with a handle you have already found. The only question that matters is not how much time you lost. It is what you do with the Tuesday that is waiting for you tomorrow morning. One transfer set up, one subscription canceled, one notebook open to a blank page with 10-year goals written at the top. If something in this video stayed with you, I want to ask you one specific thing. Not a vague intention, not "I will try to save more." Open your banking app tonight before you go to sleep and set up one automatic transfer. It does not have to be large. $20, $50, whatever number feels real and possible right now. Then come back here and leave that number in the comments. Not because I'm keeping score, but because the moment you write it down in public, even to a group of strangers, it stops being a thought and starts being a commitment. That is how this begins, not with a resolution, with a number. The conversation does not end when this video does. It continues every time you choose to build instead of just survive. And you already have everything you need to start. See you in the next one.